Good evening, everyone. I'm Georgia Davis, and welcome to AZ Illustrated Nature. Tonight, we kick off our two-part series on the importance of darkness to our world. From enhancing our ability to observe planets in outer space to supporting plants and animals in the wild. Experts say dark skies are a diminishing natural resource as a growing number of human beings live in illuminated cities around the clock. But first, here's a look at today's top stories.
The state legislative committee that oversees child protective services got an update today on the status of thousands of uninvestigated cases. The head of a team appointed by the governor to look into the issue told legislators that more than 1,400 cases have been assigned for further review, and more than 1,000 of those have seen some activity. That's out of 6,500 cases of child abuse and neglect reports discovered last month that were put aside rather than investigated. One of the two recall efforts underway against board members in Tucson's Sunnyside School District has fallen short. Pima County officials say a group trying to recall board members Daniel Hernandez Jr. and Buck Crouch didn't turn in its petitions by last week's deadline. That recall effort was started in response to another recall against Sunnyside Board President Luis Gonzalez and board member Bobby Garcia. Petitions for their recall are being reviewed for valid signatures. There's a new way to access up-to-date state economic information. The University of Arizona's Eller College of Management has created a smartphone app called Arizona's Economy. Officials at the U of A Economic and Business Research Center say it will help businesses, elected officials, and anyone wanting to access economic data. And that's a look at tonight's headlines.
This is the time of year for holiday light displays, which many people enjoy because of their beauty and brilliance. But even without these additional lights outside, researchers say our world is increasingly becoming brighter, and true nighttime darkness is getting harder to find. It may not seem like a big deal to most people, but scientists and other fans of dark skies say we are missing out by having so much light. Tony Paniagua and photojournalist Rogelio Garcia have this story.
Without light, both natural and artificial, life as we know it would not be possible. This is especially true in modern society, where people are constantly on the go and technology makes it easy to ignore the cycles of day and night. But even though our illuminated world makes our lives much more convenient, experts say we are missing out on nature by gaining so much brilliance once the sun has set. Dr. Richard Green is an astronomer at the University of Arizona Stewart Observatory. He has also worked at other locations, including Kidd Peak, west of Tucson.
Tucson is blessed by the astronomy industry. There are telescopes on almost every mountain around the city, and the world's biggest telescope on Mount Graham near Safford, east of here. And so we have a professional and aesthetic interest in keeping the skies as dark as possible.
But this is becoming increasingly difficult around the world, with booming populations in many countries that are flocking to brightly lit urban areas. Green says the glare is clearly visible in most communities, even in Tucson, which he says does a relatively better job than many other places in protecting darkness. As an example of the light among us from above, this is the panorama from Sentinel Peak, commonly called a mountain west of downtown Tucson.
It's dramatic to see from up here that the residential neighborhoods are low light, commercial neighborhoods are brighter, but lots of light is escaping upward, because when we see a direct light here, it's not going onto the street, it's not going onto the parking lot, it's not going onto the ballpark, it's just spraying into the air.
And here's another illustration of light's far-reaching implications. In this photograph, taken as a long exposure from Picacho Peak in Pinal County, photojournalist Steve Ricks pointed his camera southeast to Tucson. This is long after the sun has set, 9 o'clock at night, But the light pollution, artificial light from developed parts of Pinal and Pima County, is clearly visible. Tucson, in case you're wondering, is about 40 miles away in the distance. Richard Green says the mission of astronomers and like-minded people is not to do away with all artificial lights, but rather to find a comfortable balance that can serve the city's residents and its researchers.
I've been involved in observatory management for quite a bit of my career, and that's one of the responsibilities, is to protect the site as much as we can. But I have to say, at the same time, we live here in Tucson. We want safe streets, we want nighttime activities, and those are not inconsistent. We're great advocates for well-designed lighting that goes where you want it to go, and our problem as astronomers is when the light strays away and goes up into the sky and puts glare in our view.
For amateur astronomer and photographer Michael Cox, the message resonates quite clearly. On this night on 4th Avenue in Tucson, Cox is focusing his attention and his gear on the subtle and obvious impacts of artificial light. Colors and shadows, intensity, luminance, and others.
I'm more of a night person myself anyway. It has to do a lot with my hobbies there, but I definitely like to limit the light pollution a lot, and it's tough to get some good pictures, especially of anything in the sky, and when you're in the metropolitan area. I live actually pretty close to the university, and it's tough to see anything besides the major constellations, but it's a lot better than any other cities in the U.S., really.
Richard Green says these streetlights on the University of Arizona Mall are good examples of how science and cooperation can improve our nighttime environment. The fixtures implement a system that manages the spectrum of light that is cast toward the ground.
They're horizontal, and no light is broadcast above the horizontal, and that yellow orangey color that comes out of them is a very restricted part of the spectrum, a very narrow band of color, which is a low pressure sodium lamp. So that's a vapor excited lamp, and that is really an ideal condition for us.
And the efforts are appreciated by residents like Michael Cox. He says he enjoys dark skies for photography, astronomy, and aesthetics. It's nice to look up, he says, and see other worlds.
Even if you go up to Phoenix, you can't see hardly anything compared to what you see down here. Or if you go to a big city like New York, you can only see maybe Venus and Jupiter and the moon.
And it turns out that darkness isn't just good for scientists and photographers. Research shows that our minds and bodies also benefit.
We know that we're biological creatures, and turns out the dark actually matters for our production of melatonin and the way our bodies function in a healthy way. So being robbed of the dark actually matters.
As we just saw in the previous story, darkness is very important for astronomy and other scientific research. But as we also heard, it plays a role in biology. Many plants and animals have evolved over millions of years to compensate for or take advantage of darkness. For more on this, we are joined by Sous Garcia. He is an education specialist at Arizona-Sonora Desert Museum. Thanks for coming in to talk about this. So how important is darkness to animals?
It's very important because if we consider the biodiversity of any given place in the world, we find nocturnal animals almost all around the world. So living at night is kind of the other half of the population of animals that have adapted to escape the sunlight, escape predators. They have found another niche, if you want to call it, to live their lives. And the Sonoran Desert is no exception. We have a tremendous diversity of animals. And from kindergarten, we often learn that there are nocturnal animals and diurnal animals, day and night, almost like a dichotomy. But often we have to consider that many animals are crepuscular. How about something in between? Those animals that like to live in the twilight. They do their activities at dawn or they do activities at dusk. And that is also a very important niche to consider, not just day and night.
Right. And wow, that's interesting because, outdoors person, I see animals that do come out at dusk, right, around your campfires and the edges and then kind of go away. So how much do they get disrupted by light? Because I would think that's the time when our cities are probably so greatly illuminated. Traffic, people going home, streetlights, soccer games, that kind of thing.
No doubt about it. The impact of population and growth of cities has brought more lights, of course. And many animals migrate, some of them short distances, some of them long distances. We all know that you turn your light on in your porch and bugs come, especially at night in the summertime when the temperatures are nice, there's lots of moisture and lots of food around. They are attracted by lights, typically. Many animals, there's many research that studies the magnetic fields of the earth, lighting, the photons of the sunlight, and different things like that. So they use many of these natural clues to fly and migrate. Many of them get disrupted by these patterns of light. A big stadium starts with these big, huge, bright lights. Obviously, a group of moths or insects that are traveling from one place to another looking for food, they can easily get disrupted by that and disrupt their migration pattern, therefore their reproduction pattern, therefore their pollination patterns. And if many cacti, particularly here in the Sonora Desert, we are quite rich in columnar cacti, if they don't get the right or enough amount of pollinators, maybe those plants will not produce as much fruit as they normally do. And those animals that were depending on those foods for their energy and continue traveling their path may not complete their cycle. It might be disrupted somehow. Many insects and birds and bats depend on our cacti.
Well, and what about those animals that then depend on the insects that maybe aren't where the insects would have been before the lights came?
Exactly. We have, of course, charismatic animals like white-winged doves and some bats that pollinate our cacti, our columnar cacti, like organ pipe cactus and saguaros and those beautiful cactus that we have in the Sonora Desert. But there are many, many insects that pollinate many, many other plants, not just the columnar cacti, plants that are essential food for the rest of the animals in the desert, for the javelinas, for the coyotes, for the deer, for different things. And when those animals get disrupted, again, in the long term, the biodiversity of plants gets disrupted. And we have plants like Sacred Datura, that is a beautiful, quite poisonous plant that is beautiful white trumpet-like flower that is absolutely beautiful. We have the Reina de la Noche, also known as the night-blooming cereus. Very rare, but they're quite amazing to see. Those are extremely nocturnal plants that depend on pollinators. And then the pollinators themselves, like insects, hawk moths, and bees and wasps, some come out in the daytime, but many other nocturnal animals are food for other animals, including pygmy owls or elf owls or screech owls. They eat those nocturnal insects that are pollinating our plants.
Right.
It's a whole complex tapestry that makes it happen.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it ripples outward. So how big of a problem is light pollution or light where it's not supposed to be, kind of in comparison to other things like other environmental pollutants?
One of my favorite things to see is, I don't know if you've seen those pictures of the world at night, when it's absolutely amazing to see the outline of the continents based on the lighting around the world. And you can define every country in the world by looking at the lights, and you see, like in the United States, the East Coast has more lights than the West Coast. In the West Coast, we have one place, probably the Four Corner areas, where it's probably the darkest place in the Southwest. And I've been privileged to be there, and you can actually see the stars and see a lot more of these dark skies. And of course, it's been a humongous problem, particularly in the last 50 to 80 years, if you consider the increase of population, increase of cities. And to me, this is just one more concept, along with habitat destruction, loss of riparian areas, introduction of exotic species. When you put all those things together, are affecting the biodiversity of things.
Right, it all starts to add up. Okay, well, thank you so much for telling us about this.
Thank you.
A retired FBI agent vanished in Iran, reportedly part of a secret, unauthorized mission for the CIA in one of the most serious scandals for the spy agency in years. Those are just some of the stories we're covering on tonight's PBS News Hour.
Pope Francis made headlines for criticizing the wealth gap. Archbishop Joseph Kurtz, new head of the American bishops, says he's challenging Catholics and economists.
We need to address inequalities within our world that often obviously hold people back because of the great poverty in which they live.
The Pope's message on the next morning edition from NPR News.
We have been speaking about the importance of darkness today, and now we go to an author who wrote a whole book on this subject. It's called The End of Night: Searching for Natural Darkness in the Age of Artificial Light. Paul Bogard works at James Madison University in Virginia, but he is traveling the country speaking about this topic. He recently joined me here at Arizona Public Media to talk about his book. Thanks for coming in.
Great to be here.
So let's talk about your latest book, The End of Night. What was your inspiration for writing this?
Well, it comes from having the great fortune of growing up in Minnesota and having a cabin in the north and experiencing real night, real darkness when I was growing up. So I know what the Milky Way looks like. I know what it's like to be in the woods when you can't see your hands in front of your face. And then as I got older, I started to learn about light pollution and how all the light in the sky is robbing us of those experiences of a night sky and a true darkness. So I wanted to address both the joy and beauty of night and natural darkness and how important it is for us, but also the real costs of light pollution.
So real light, I mean, now that I've read your book, I'm not even sure I know what real night looks like.
Most Americans don't, actually. There's a scale that's called the Bortle scale. It's a scale that astronomers use to talk about levels of darkness. It goes from 9, our brightest places, down to 1, our darkest places. And most Americans live most of their lives in levels 5 and above. And so we rarely or never experience darkness below that level of 5. We never experience these, truly wonderful nights and what we think of as real darkness.
5 and above. Now that's kind of surprising to me. So what about people who spend time in places like national parks or out camping or in the wilderness?
Well, those are some wonderful places, and many of the parks are doing a wonderful job of preserving darkness. The National Park Service now considers darkness one of the resources that they want to preserve. And one of the real riches we have, especially in the western part of the country, is some of this true darkness, levels that would be 3 or 2, or even if you get lucky sometimes, 1, if you're in the right place at the right time. So these are the places that we really want to conserve so that Americans can have the experience of real night.
And what would be the right place at the right time?
Well, it depends a lot on if the moon is out, and if it's cloudy, if there's pollution in the atmosphere, lots of different factors of that kind of thing. But the most important thing is just to get away from artificial lights.
And where would you say is the darkest place in the United States?
Well, places like the darkest place I went was Death Valley National Park, which is phenomenal and wonderful. There are many places in the West, but it's really important that we pay attention to these areas that we already know and love, like the national parks, because maybe there's a really remote place and kind of in the middle of nowhere that's the darkest place, but if we don't pay attention to it, if we don't go there, if we don't love it, it's gonna fade.
So let's do more than just kind of romanticize the night here, right? Because it's not just about being able to stargaze. There are important repercussions to being saturated with light.
Yeah, there really are, and as important as experience of a true night sky is, it's only one of the issues. And so I would name the ecological impacts of artificial light at night and the human health costs of artificial light at night foremost that we might be thinking about. We have ecologically, life on Earth evolved in bright days. We need light, but also dark nights, and we need darkness, and so does the rest of life on Earth. And so, for example, we have 60% of invertebrates, so insects that are purely nocturnal, and 30% of vertebrate species are nocturnal as well, and so many others are crepuscular, that is, they're most active at dawn and dusk. And when we flood their habitat with our light, it at the very least disrupts that habitat, if not destroys that habitat for them. So and we're talking about things like creatures like sea turtles, migrating birds, bats, moths, creatures that are really important to the ecosystem. And then on the human health side of things, what researchers are finding is that we're impacted by artificial light in significant ways. It's disrupting our sleep and contributing to sleep disorders, which are tied to every major disease we're dealing with right now. It's confusing our circadian rhythms, those 24-hour rhythms that orchestrate our body's health. And then maybe most significantly, it's impeding the production of the hormone melatonin, which is only produced at night in the dark. And the lack of melatonin in our bloodstream now has been linked to an increased risk for breast cancer and prostate cancer. So all these things combined has the World Health Organization considering working the night shift a probable carcinogen.
Wow, interesting. So are there different kinds of artificial lighting, and do those have differential impacts?
Well, absolutely. One of the things we talk about is just the way that we use light. So the fixtures themselves, what contributes to light pollution the most are what we call unshielded fixtures, where the light is blasting all over. It's going into the sky, it's glaring into our eyes, it's shining into our bedrooms, and we don't want that. We're not saying let's not have lights, really. We're saying let's have light that's used thoughtfully, responsibly, intelligently, and that means shielding the light so it's going down where we need it and it's not going in every direction. And then, the technology of lighting is changing rapidly. We're seeing more and more LEDs, for example, and that we're moving from electric lighting to electronic lighting, and that represents both real promise and real peril. Promise in the sense that LEDs are highly programmable. You can dim them according to the time of night or what's happening in different areas, or even turn them off. But also peril in the sense that it could just mean more light everywhere.
Right, and of course you do make that point several times in the book that light can even be beautiful. So you're not saying light is terrible. Let's get rid of it.
Artificial light at night is a wonder. It's amazing. And if you go, as I did, spend time in Paris, for example, the city of light, where they've spent the last 30 years relighting the city to create this atmosphere of beauty, and they really think about it, and it is really beautiful. You can't go there and think that light at night isn't beautiful.
Well, let's talk about this term, light trespass. I'm not sure I've heard that term before.
I love that term because it is so descriptive of what we're talking about, which light trespass is light from one property that's not only lighting that property, but it's crossing over to light all the properties around it. So imagine, I have a wonderful image in the talk I often give where a brand new science building that the school I was teaching at was very proud of is all lit up, but that light is all crossing the street and lighting up the houses where the students are living as well. And you can see in the image that the students have had to hang black curtains in their windows just so they can go to sleep at night, just so they can block that light. So in a country that is, I would say, obsessed with property rights, when it comes to light trespass, we just seem oblivious to it.
Interesting point, yeah, and suddenly those boundaries they're non-existent in many ways.
Yeah.
Huh. So, well, what are some of the biggest offenders when it comes to light trespass?
Well, definitely gas stations, parking lots. Estimates are now that gas stations and parking lots are lit about 10 times as brightly as they were just 20 years ago. Stadium lighting, car dealerships, and then I think just kind of a lack of awareness that when we light our schools or our businesses, we too often are using light that's being blasted out kind of in a horizontal angle rather than, again, just lighting our property, lighting our business. We're lighting the whole neighborhood, and that's light trespass.
So what about this notion of security? Because there's this linking of light and safety.
Sure, and again, nobody is saying let's just not have any light. I think the mistake that we make is we think that because some light helps us be safer and more secure at night, that ever more light will give us ever more safety and security, and that's where where it kind of falls apart. The equation falls apart. What happens when you have too much light is that it makes it harder for you to see. You can't see past the light, for example. It's hard on our eyes. Too much light will cast shadows. Too much light will light you, but it'll also leave the bad guy in the shadows. He can decide, or she can decide, if you're a victim that they want to pursue. Maybe your house is what they want. And so what we're asking for is just, if we're truly concerned about safety and security at night, we will light in the same way that we'll light if we're concerned about light pollution, which is to say shielded lights, a lower level of lights, light only on the property that we want to.
Well, and there was a couple of photographs that I thought were really interesting here, where you have one of the security lights and there's somebody off in the shadows. Yeah. And when the security light is on full blast, you can't see this person. And when the person raises their hand and shields the light, all of a sudden you can. So it starts to make sense how this kind of low-level lighting might actually be more secure than this kind of blasting light.
Absolutely. We're so used to all this light. Many of us have grown up with it. We just think this is how it is, and we think that we need all this light for safety and security, and we really don't. Some light is good and it helps us become safer, but all this light is not helping us be that much more secure. And those images that you reference in the book are probably the most popular, images in my presentation and in the book, because when you show those two back to back, when you block the light, when you shield the light, you can see so much better. And there's the bad guy standing in the shadows,
Right, and I think some of us are familiar with that. I mean, the idea of light blindness, right? And using flashlights can actually make it more difficult to see at night, but somehow it hasn't translated in terms of thinking about security.
Absolutely. If you take a flashlight out at night, you can see straight ahead of you, but it blocks everything out. You can't see around you. So if you're really interested in seeing at night, take a red flashlight out, or mask the flashlight with red so you don't lose your night vision. You can see all around you, for example.
Well, I mean, populations are growing. I mean, we're using more and more light. We're using more and more saturations of light. Is there a chance is there any way to reverse this?
I think so. I'm really optimistic about it. I think it's an issue that as more and more people hear about it, we'll realize that the way we're doing things now is not the best way we could do it, that we can light much more intelligently, thoughtfully, responsibly. Here in Tucson, you have a lot of good examples of good lighting, and Flagstaff is another great example. Many places in Europe. The country of France just started new lighting laws in July for the entire country that will cut energy use, lower carbon emissions, but also, as they say, preserve the nocturnal environment. So we really can do something about this issue.
Interesting, and that means it's on people's radar screen also.
Increasingly, yeah. We're getting brighter and brighter, but more and more people are thinking about it.
Paying attention.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Tomorrow night on AZ Illustrated Science, we continue the conversation about the effects of light on our bodies with a well-known sleep and dream specialist featured in Bogard's book. That's our show. To post a comment on any of these stories or to keep up with the latest news, you may visit our website at azpm.org. I'm Georgia Davis. Thanks for watching.